This is our first video where we dive into each of the Great Lakes. As I introduced in our opening video, we are going to start with Lake Superior, which, by its name, would imply that it is the greatest of the Great Lakes. While that ranking is easily in dispute, it does give us a nice starting point. Before we even start, we need to be aware that Lake Superior is its English name. The traditional name of the lake in Ojibwe is Gichigami, which means huge water or big sea. The native nations that lived along the shores and within the watershed have a much deeper history than the short 400 years that Europeans have even been aware of the region, and we need to be mindful that there is a history that extends far beyond the name of Lake Superior. Just a super quick recap. The chain of the Great Lakes lies just a bit to the east of the center in the North American continent. Many of them cross the Canadian-United States border, Lake Superior being one of them. So it is an international lake. Lake Superior is both the westernmost and the northernmost of the Great Lakes. Now that we've put ourselves on the map, how did Lake Superior come about? The region around Lake Superior is amongst some of the oldest exposed rocks on the planet. In this region, magma forced its way to the surface, creating mountains and laying down many of the valuable minerals that would drive the economic development of the region by both Native Americans and Europeans. Following the magma deposition, natural erosion trimmed the mountains and spread the subsurface materials throughout the region. Following the formation of the land by magma deposition, the planet began to rip itself apart in North America from Kansas to Lake Superior along what is known as the Mid-Continent Rift. This region creates some of the stunning steep-sided shoreland that can be found along the north shore of the lake. During the rift formation, magma continued to bubble up, still influencing the deposition of valuable minerals. As if that were not enough, nature had one more trick in store for the region. Lying in the northern half of North America, the Lake Superior region was then blanketed by many different sheets of ice, as the northern ice advanced and retreated during the ice ages. These sheets of ice planed to the surface, scraping and smoothing the landscape. As the ice from the glaciers melted, the water filled the area that would become Lake Superior. As with other places on the planet that were covered by ice sheets, hint, watch the Lake Agassiz video to learn how the weight of the ice pushed down the surface of the Earth. As the ice retreated north, this weight was removed, and the planet began to rebound to its normal shape. It didn't bounce back like when you take your finger off a balloon. The rebound is slow, just a few meters a century, but this does mean that Lake Superior is slowly getting shallower. All of the shaping of the planet around Lake Superior region brings us to the lake we have today. It's 350 miles in length, 160 miles in width, has a surface area of 31,700 square miles, and an average depth of 483 feet. The maximum depth of the lake is 1,333 feet, which makes this the low point, the third lowest point in the North American continent. The bottom of Lake Superior is 733 feet below sea level. This is mighty deep. And of course, for those of you who are thirsty, the lake has 2,900 cubic miles of water. With all of these numbers, Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world by area, and the third largest by volume. So it is superior, and great. While the lake is massive, the watershed of the lake is actually quite small for its size. The entirety of the watershed is around 49,300 square miles. The ratio of watershed to lake size is 1.55, which is relatively small for such a large body of water. However, in some ways, this is a pretty good thing. It means that while the larger land around the watershed is a contributor to the lake, it is not as significant as we will find in other lakes, and there is less potential area for surface runoff to add contaminants and other material to the lake. While the larger watershed drains into the lake from many streams, rivers, and surface runoff, all this water eventually winds up near the city of Sault Ste. Marie and the Soo Locks. The Soo Locks serve as the interface between the lake and the St. Mary's River. Prior to the installation of the Soo Locks, the St. Mary's River rapids were a significant obstacle because the lake water had to drop 25 feet in just 74 miles to get to the level of Lake Huron. As we move out from the lake into the surrounding landscape, we will next explore the region from the shorelands to the interior landscapes consisting of forest and wetlands. Of course, we will also need to look at some of the human-created landscapes because they do influence the ecology and history of the lake and the larger watershed. With its underlying geology of hard rock, much of the Lake Superior shoreline has steep rocky bluffs that are resistant to the tremendous erosive forces that occur within the lake. These rocky bluffs rising dozens of feet from the cold water create an imposing picture to one looking for a safe anchorage after a long day of sailing. While rocky bluffs are a significant portion of the shoreline, there are many rocky beaches. These rocky beaches occur in areas where the wind and other erosive forces have scoured away the smaller particles of sand. Those rocky beaches, depending upon the wind and water action, can have stones ranging from cobbles to small pebbles. If you ever find yourself in the Lake Superior region and wandering the rocky beaches, I encourage you to engage in the popular activity of agate hunting. These agates are a remnant of the lake's volcanic history, and you can take one home with you for polishing and storing on your mantle. In the more protected areas, one can find sandy beaches that are charming for a day in the sun. These delightful areas are perfect for a picnic and spending several hours with the children playing in the water during a warm summer day. The inland areas of Lake Superior used to be dominated by white pine forests. The picture on the right shows the density of the pine forest behind a logging camp. The picture on the left shows a logger sectioning a pine log. As with many other forested landscapes, the pine forests were seen as inexhaustible. That is, inexhaustible until they were exhausted. While white pine was a dominant tree in the Lake Superior landscape, there were aspen and birch forests that ran along the ridges of the region. With the removal of the white pine, these aspen-birch systems expanded and now occupy a significant portion of the landscape. As one is driving through the near shore and the inland region, it's the aspen and birch system that is the dominant in the landscape. While aspen and birch have become the dominant tree in the ecosystem, we should not write off the white pine. It is trying to make a comeback. Whether by natural regeneration or through the helping hand of landowners, these trees are slowly popping up here and there. Now, if we can just get the deer to not like them so much, we might see a more rapid return of these majestic giants. We could bring a great tree to a great lake. See what I did there? In the wetter areas within the watershed, we have wetlands. These areas of water retention and filtration do a lot to protect the quality of water that flows off the landscape into the larger lake. There are a variety of wetland types in the region, including peatlands that can store a tremendous amount of carbon and acidic bogs. I'll let you in on a creepy little secret. I think it would be neat to be a bog body. I'll just leave that thought with you. As the glaciers retreated, humans quickly moved into the landscape, attracted by the bounty available from the land and water. As these people became permanent residents, they left their mark as they changed the landscape to accommodate their needs and desires. Some of these changes were light, while others were more intensive. Therefore, the post-glacial lake basin is developed with the presence of people, and while the people who lived in the area are influenced by the dynamics of the basin also influenced them. As Europeans arrived, there were many population centers, cities, and towns that grew within the Lake Superior basin. Many of them developed around a specific industry such as mining, fishing, or logging. Some of these population centers grew to become major areas of trade and commerce. Others did not last past their boom times, rising quickly, becoming home to dozens or hundreds of people, and then disappearing to be reclaimed by the surrounding forests, with only the roads left to indicate what was once a thriving community. With the geologic history of the region, there are many interesting rock and mineral features in this watershed. Earlier, I mentioned agates on the beaches. In the area surrounding Lake Superior, we have taconite, which is a form of iron. This is an image of the post-processed taconite into pellets. However, this is not how the iron comes out of the ground. The iron is mined from the surrounding region. Historically, there is both underground mining and open pit mining, although open pit mining is more common today. Sudan Mine State Park is one area in the region where you can take a tour of an underground mine to learn what it is like to work hundreds of feet below ground. There is also a particle physics lab underground that one can visit as well, which I highly recommend. Following extraction, the iron is brought from the mines to the processing plants and then shipped on freighters to steel manufacturers down lake. A colleague of mine had an interesting saying. He said that World War II saw the fastest movement of iron ore from the inland regions of Lake Superior to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean in geologic history. Normally, this would be a slow process. However, in World War II, the iron ore was mined from the Iron Range. It was then transported from the Iron Range across the Great Lakes to the great shipbuilding yards on the Atlantic Ocean. From these shipbuilding yards, millions of tons of shipping wound up on the bottom of the Atlantic during the German torpedo campaign. So according to my colleague, this was the fastest movement of iron from the interior of a continent to the bottom of the ocean in the history of the planet. While the building of cities and mining reshaped the land around Lake Superior, surely the shape of the lake itself must have remained the same. Well, not exactly. There is a funny story about that. At the western edge of Lake Superior, there is a beautiful bay that is almost as if some divine force created a protected anchorage for ships. Two cities arose in this region, Duluth, Minnesota, and Superior, Wisconsin. Both cities wanted to make use of this harbor. Here we have the western shore of Lake Superior. In the south, you can see the city of Superior in Wisconsin. On the north, we have Duluth, Minnesota. In the late 1800s, the only access to this harbor was from the southern entrance because of the pesky Minnesota Point that stuck out north of Duluth. The only safe way to get to Duluth was through the south entry point, which meant that ships would have to pass by Superior, Wisconsin first, where they would naturally stop rather than continuing north. So, of course, Duluth would have to suffer from a fluke of geology. However, for the founding fathers of Duluth, a strip of land would not stand in their way to shipping greatness. No, they were going to do what any great American would do during this time. Regardless of any natural or legal barrier, the legend goes that the people of Duluth took it upon themselves to build their own darn canal. And in the 1870s, overcoming natural barriers and ignoring legal injunctions, they broke through Minnesota Point, connecting the port of Duluth directly with Lake Superior, allowing ships to avoid having to pass by Superior, making the Duluth Shipping Canal a vital feature of Lake Superior shipping. Today it is also a major tourist destination where people can watch the big and small ships coming and going while enjoying a beautiful day in the harbor among the shops and restaurants. In the previous slide, I spoke about the new shipping canal in Duluth being a significant tourist attraction. Lake Superior does have many beautiful days that feel a little like a piece of heaven on earth. Blue sky, blue water, not a wave in sight. However, the weather can change, and change quickly. There are gales that blow up in the lake, creating waves tens of feet high that can easily run over the decks of even the largest ships. These gales can even take down the freighters like the Edmund Fitzgerald, sending the ship and her crew to the bottom of the lake in minutes. And of course, we cannot forget that Lake Superior lies in the northern latitudes. It is not uncommon for the lake to freeze entirely during the winter season. There have been more than a few times that I have attended a staff meeting in Canal Park during the winter, only to be distracted by massive chunks of ice crawling over the breakwater and grinding up onto the shoreline just outside the window of our meeting room. Shifting to the water quality of the basin, the lake has several things going for it. First, it is large both in terms of surface area and depth. This means there is a lot of water in the lake that can serve as a buffer to any contaminant that may enter the lake that could reduce water quality. Second, the larger basin is a largely intact watershed ecosystem. While there has been a history of logging, the forest cover has largely returned to stabilize the soils and maintain the filtration of rainwater. In addition, even though there are some major cities on the lake, within the larger watershed there has been limited development, and much of the development that has occurred in the past has been abandoned. With these advantages, the overall water quality of the lake is good. There are occasional beach closings and warnings and some fish consumption advisories, but in general, the condition of the lake is pretty good. However, good now is not a reason to rest on our laurels. There are still threats to the lake. During periods of very heavy rain, there is erosion from the larger watershed into the lake. In some cases, it takes looking at the scale of erosion from space to fully understand the magnitude of the issue. There is also the potential for hazardous contamination from future developments. While the chemistry of the lake is good, there are some concerns around the biology. The historic assemblage of species is still present in the lake, and the ecosystem is in fairly good condition. However, as the lake is an international body of water that sees ships from around the world, there are a variety of aquatic invasive species that have been added to the ecosystem. Many of these, such as the sea lamprey and the zebra mussel, have become species of concern, and who knows what will come in the future. As Lake Superior is an international lake split between Canada and the United States of America, these waters have been contested. While there were no major battles between Canada, Great Britain, or the United States during the War of 1812 on the lake, there was a British warship patrolling the region. Thankfully, in the Washington Treaty of 1871, the Great Lakes were demilitarized, which allowed for a blossoming of cooperation between Canada and the United States. It would be really unfortunate for a tourist boat out of Duluth to be seized by the Canadians, with all the passengers impressed into service in the Canadian Navy. But thankfully, those days are behind us. While the United States and Canada are the primary nations involved within the larger management of the lake, there are so many other groups that are also involved. There are several tribal nations that are interested and invested in the protection and management of the lake. The province of Ontario and the states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan are also involved with the lake and land management. Within these states, there are also cities and counties. And outside of government organizations, there are many not-for-profit entities interested in protecting and improving the lake. For such a large body of water, there are many who are highly invested in the care of the resource. But these relationships are complex and can be confusing to someone who is not familiar with the network of organizations. Let's return to where we began on the shores of Gitchigami. The original name of Lake Superior is memorialized for Americans by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in his Song of Hiawatha poem. So as we look to the future of the greatest of the Great Lakes, we stand and wait, wondering what the future will hold, and where the lake will take us, and where we will take the lake.